Good evening. I am Pete, also known as Risk for Rewards, or over on Twitter at Risk for Rewards. Currently got over 14,000 followers over here, and we're about to hit 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube. Obviously, YouTube is a bit of a new thing to me, but it's a very quick and easy way of getting as much information out as possible to as many people as possible. It's also a lot quicker than me writing up all of the blogs and the processes. Um, Today we're going to go through bankers and blowouts. I know most people, they go and they say, oh, there's tipsters, there's big price winners, and everyone's chasing the 33 to 1 shots. But obviously a 33 to 1 shot will come in theory, once every 33 times, if you're lucky. However, a lot of people who will be punting at the Cheltenham Festival, it's all about the short price favourites. Because we're not being funny, at the end of the day, you're going to make most of your money at the top end of the market, back in the shorties. So just going off a few things from recent years, I was going to go into a full blog and go through it all, but there's so much coming out in the next 2 weeks ready for my blog, which will be out a week on Sunday. I will have a separate YouTube video which will cover everything that's coming out on the blog. It's different to other years in the fact that I'm going to be going through the blog on a YouTube video, so I'll explain all the different things that are happening because it's not quite like the last few years. The last 6 weeks have been very busy for me, and the next week will be even busier for me in making sure everything's on there. Things like pointers for the 2024 festival, anti-post my selections from last year, how they fared in the race, in case when you're looking through my content, whether you think this guy's got no idea what he's talking about, you can have a look and see, yeah, he had no idea. He picked 3 horses last year. They all came unplaced. Obviously, it's only a small scale, but if you want to go back to my last few years, all of my records are on my blog, all my WordPresses. I've covered the last three, I think 3 Cheltenham festivals, and everything's been on Twitter for the last 3 Cheltenham festivals. But just something to bear in mind when you're looking at the last 2 years. I did state at the start of this season was the fact that it's going to be very different coming into the festival this year because the last 2 years we've had COVID impact heavily. And what that's caused is many people have chosen not to buy and not to invest in horse ownership. And also, it caused a much smaller and less competitive fields for things like the Supreme Novice or the Arkle. And the reason for that was because, quite simply, people didn't want to pay and they also didn't want to enter their horses unless they had realistic chances. So, for instance, you could have a horse over in Ireland, and they thought, well, what's the point in paying all the costs to get it over to England for the Cheltenham Festival if it hasn't got a realistic chance when they can't go, they can't travel? It's just a question of being at home. So you had horses like races like the Supreme where you may have less than 10 runners, and that was pretty apparent for the last 2 years. We had a lot of short price favourites, and it paid very well towards the front end of the market. And I'm not so sure it's going to be the case this year. I mean, just going through a few quick stats. So last year there were 5 odds-on shots, 3 obliged. The 2 that didn't was Shishkin pulled up, and obviously Galopin Des Champs should have obliged, sent off at 5 to 6, but fell unfortunately. There were 28 horses at an SP of 3 to 1 or shorter. 12 of those lost. However, on 7 of the occasions, there were 2 horses at 3 to 1 or shorter. So in it, obviously, you can't have 2 winners. So in effect, you've got to knock out at least one of those 2. But in effect, 21 of the 28 of those at 3 to 1 or shorter finished in the first 2 places. So they really did perform well above expectation, because obviously you'd expect it and hope it, but it's not reality to think that they would achieve that sort of, the market would be that close. But this is what I was saying about the fact that with small fields, lack of competition, a lot of horses beat the same horses again, if that makes sense. So a prime example would be Appreciate It in the Supreme Novice. So that was 2 years ago now. But you looked at the horses that he was beating, like the likes of Ballyadam, Blue Lord. Blue Lord much improved now, but back then, the Blue Lord, quite a weak, gangly horse. And he was beaten, he'd already beaten both those 2 horses twice. Going into the Supreme, he was racing for a 3rd time. So, I mean, you're looking at your betting market, and he was like a 6 to 4 shot a few days before. And I think it was an 8-runner race. It had Metier over here and a couple of others, Soaring Glory, that had done a bit here and there over in the UK. And then over there, he had the same horse he was beating. So what I'm saying is that was a very easy to predict race. All he had to do was repeat his form, and he did. So in effect, it looked easy pickings for the last 2 years. Last year was a little bit more, obviously, but obviously, as I've just said, you look at the markets and like they very much went to the field. You're not getting horses that are taking other horses out. There's not really much unpredictability. And I did mention going into the festival, I was slightly concerned with the fact that both Galopin Des Champs and Bob Ollinger had only had 2 runs each as novice chasers, and one of them could have a mishap. And long and behold, one did. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a mistake, but if he'd had 2 or 3 more runs, would he have done that? Would he have sidestepped? Would he? Like, obviously, it wasn't like he was dodging anything. It was just completely bad luck. But you just never know. So what I am going to go back to, I'm going to carry on with a few more stats before going into bangers and blowouts. Is I'll go back to before 2020 because I think it's important to emphasise the before COVID times. So in 2020, there were 18 horses that were 3-1 or shorter. Difference was 16 of those lost. There were 6 odds-on favourites and only 1 of those obliged. So when you're actually looking in reality in a normal Cheltenham environment, you could get 4 or 5 odds-on shots in a week, and you could only be getting one of them win. So I think we've been very fortunate in the last 2 years. I've had my 2 best festivals the last 2 years because I've thought it's been so easy to predict. I'm not because I'm cocky or any sort of like arrogance in any sort of way. I think most people would have, if they've said, oh, I've had a really good 2 years. I bet there's people that are hooked on the Cheltenham Festival after going into COVID thinking, what am I going to do and stuff. Cheltenham was one of the only few things that actually managed to make it through and beyond twice. And they've really enjoyed it. But I do think, and it's obvious, I'm not just, obviously this isn't just me saying, oh, you've thought of something else. You look at the markets now, you look at the Supreme, the Ballymore, the Albert Bartlett, then look at the novice chasers. They're a lot more competitive. And yes, okay, maybe it's luck, it's all of these other things as well. And maybe they were just a random 2 years. But I do think this is going to be a very different year. The other aspect, obviously, that I did mention last year after the festival, why it was going to be so much more more difficult to anti-post was Willie Mullins. Willie Mullins had 10 winners last year, breaking his own records. I do not think he will get that this year, but it's not to say he won't. I think he had around 60 horses last year and he had 10 winners. Gordon Elliott had similar, and I think Gordon Elliott had 2. He had Delta Work and another, or he may have only had Delta Work. So that's the difference. The problem is with Willie Mullins is he's got so many good horses, you just don't know where they're going to go, who's going to go there, and you're guessing all the time. So that was another reason why it was going to be difficult. And also, you don't know generally how good which horse is until they get there on the day. Like he's got the equivalent of so like look at John McConnell, sorry, in the Supreme, like with Marine Nationale, that is his stable star. So Willie Mullins has got like 2 of those that could be stable stars in the Supreme. Then he's got 2 of those in the Ballymore. So most people have been guessing all year round, trying to guess where they're going. So obviously it doesn't matter now. We're 2 weeks out. So the anti-post side of it's done. The guessing's done. We're pretty much there. So, but going back to Willie Mullins, we're just going to have a little look through and I'll tell you a few. So Mullins broke his own stats last year. But going back further, as I said, pre-COVID, between 2006 and 2020, he had 63 runners, of which 48% have won, 78 placed. Almost 50% of his runners, when short, priced won at the festival. So Willie Mullins, obviously that's a small portion. Those are 63 runners of his short priced horses, not obviously total, because he obviously had a lot more runners than that altogether. But what I'm saying is Willie Mullins is very much roughly around that when he's in the short price bracket. So he's hitting around a 50% strike rate. So, but coming into last year, we've got Willie Mullins had obviously 10 winners from the 28 races. And as expected, going into this year, of the favourites, 3-1 or shorter, Willie Mullins has already got 6 of the current 16 that are priced 3-1 or shorter. And if you condense that further to really short price, he has 6 out of the 11 favourites who are below 2-1. And it's likely that he could end up, come the Triumph, he could end up with 2 that are below 2-1. So obviously, in summary, it's just the fact that Willie Mullins, when the money's down and the prices are short, they are generally around a 50% strike rate. So you can stand there and you can be like, oh, well, Willie's is too short. They're too short for a reason. They're too short because the trainer knows what he's doing. He's got the best horses. Everything about him obviously screams to you. So if you want to take on favourites, there's going to be favourites across the week. And everyone, you've got to take on favourites somewhere. But it's just worth bearing in mind that he is going to, they're not all going to win, but he is a man that if he's got his favourite, like I'm not just picking another trainer out of a hat, I'm not going to say a name, but just like say it was an Irish trainer, really well known or whatever, and they had a really short price runner. They don't necessarily have the same sort of strike rate as Willie Mullins has. But at the same time, 50%, whilst that is brilliant, that is meaning that 50% of those favourites are losing. So nothing's guaranteed. Anyway, right, so the way I'm going to do this is obviously bankers and blowouts is a very subjective. Well, I say it's not subjective at all. It's very straight. It's fact. There's no in between. If you're saying something's a banker, it is a yes tick box or a no tick box. So how I'm going to do this instead is I'm going to go for the banker blowout side of things with the will the horse win in my view, but I'm also going to cover the would I back this horse at the current price. So it might be that I wouldn't back it because of the current price, even though I think it's going to win, or it might be that I wouldn't back it now because close to the day you'll get a bigger price. Or I think there's, and I'm going to give my full view. I'm not just going to say this and that. Because at the end of the day, as I've stated many times before, I'm not here as a tipster. I'm here as a content creator to try and share things. And as you'll see with the blog, it's very different this year in the fact that I've not just wrote up a block on this is my horse that I've backed and this is why. I've covered a lot more horses. So like the Gold Cup, I'll cover say 8 horses because I want people to be able to pick up that blog and then say like a quick index. Oh, I'm at work. I don't have much time. 10 minutes. I can run through everything. The last 2 years, festival form, previous form. Yep. Okay. I agree with everything that Pete said in that, but I disagree with his conclusion. So I'm going to go with this horse. And that's what I'm trying to do for people. I'm not here to just stand there and say, oh yeah, this will win this and this. I give my opinion because some people want my opinion and because obviously it makes sense. There's no point giving everything and not giving a conclusion, but at the end of the day my content is there to help people decide for themselves. So onto the right, so I'm going to go through. I'm obviously not going to cover all the favourites because a lot of them are a lot bigger. We're not talking banker and blowouts. So banker and blowouts generally what I'm aiming at is 2-1 or shorter, but I'm not going to obviously take on so going to the Arkle, there's no point me taking on the bankers or blowout situation for that because there's 2 6-4 favourites. So I'm just going to skip that altogether. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of content. As I said, with the blog, there'll be more videos, and I've already covered those sort of races, but I'm going straight up short. So Champion Hurdle, Constitution Hill, banker, yes, job done, move on. However, my point with Constitution Hill is a lot of people are going to be wary of. You do have to think about this race and the fact that there's going to be people who have backed him at, say, 4-6 on, people who have backed him at 16-1. And what I want people to think about, this is obviously, I'm not telling you what to do, this is what I'm just trying to say what is coming out of inside my mind, is you have to think, if you've had a good bet on this and you think, okay, if it wins, that's brilliant, but I could lay some of it off, is just think about the lay side of things. If you do want to lay it, would you back it at the current price? So what I mean is at the moment, currently on the exchange, it's 2-5. So if someone was to say to you, you've lost all your bets today, would you back or lay that horse to finish your day? Or if you'd had no bets and you could only have one, would you back or lay that horse? So you just need to take out the complete equation of whether it costs, if it's £1 million you're winning or whether it's £2 you're winning, and just think, is that a good price? For me at the moment, currently, and this is my complete perspective, obviously of my own opinion, is at the moment Constitution Hill, if he sat around 1-2 on the day, and if someone said to you, you haven't got a bet on the race, I'd still be backing that rather than laying it, which makes it very hard for me to say that I'd lay off any of the money that I would be due to win. It would be rather, if something was to happen to him, if he did get beat, however, or if he fell or whatever, then it would be one of those where you just accept it and say, at the end of the day, that was the choice I've made. But I will cover a lot more on that as we get closer, both on videos and in my Cheltenham blog. But at the end of the day, Constitution Hill, there's very little to knock him with. He's got about £10 in hand. Obviously, his form is so far ahead of everything else. He looks a potential superstar. One thing that I would say to everyone, and would I back it at the current 1-3 if I didn't have a bet? I wouldn't put you off it. That field's going to fall apart. You probably end with, there might only be 6 runners in it at the end of the day. So I don't know what price he's going to go off. He could go off 1-4 on the day. He could go off not 1-2, like 2-5 or 1-3. So would I back it if I didn't have a bet? I wouldn't be afraid to back it. It's currently, I'm looking at 4-11. So if I didn't have a bet, I wouldn't be afraid of putting in anything. I have backed him. I've backed him at 5-2, and a couple of prices shorter, like evens and stuff. But at the same time, there's no reason. I think this horse, and I'm hoping just like everyone else, you don't even need to tell you, you've seen. It's very rare to get a horse on the National Hunt Sphere that looks like a bit like our version of a Frankel, where they are really setting the scene. They're not just doing it on the clock, they're doing it visually. They're beating good horses. And if he sets his stamp on this by beating State Man, which I think State Man, if he came to this, he'd be favourite for the Champion Hurdle, and I'd be happy if I'd backed him at the early price, but I wouldn't be going in like rock solid confident. I'd be thinking, yeah, he's going to beat this field, but I think he's had the races round to suit out there, and he's beaten a below par Honeysuckle. and Vauban, who's turned out to not be so great and is very young at the moment, so still got time on his hands to. And the English, like horses like I like to move it, not for me whatsoever. So, do I think he'll win? Yes. Would I back him at 4-11 if I didn't have a bet? Yes. So I wouldn't be afraid to back him if I needed to, or if I wanted to. Do I think his price will change? I've got no idea. That's one of the beauties of anti-posts, the fact that that just gets taken out of your mind. The other thing to bear in mind with Constitution Hill is I think he can be rode anyway. If State Man takes a lead, he'll be fine. If they want to go slow, he'll just go past him. I think my biggest fear is obviously him falling, but that's the same with any other horse. Right then, on to a more realistic favourite, one that obviously punters will be looking to get stuck into, especially as it's going to be the nightmare because it's the last race of the day. This will be the one that the bookies sit there and rub their hands together. Because if punters have had a really good day, they'll be looking to blow this one out of the water with the accumulators. And if punters have had a really bad day, punters will be steaming in and they'll be looking to get it beat to really finish them off on day one. So obviously the horse in question is Galiard Du Mesnil in the National Hunt Chase. I'm just going to bring the rest of the market up. I'm just going to clarify, obviously, I'm not doing this with like a big stats and loads of things like in front of me to sit and read because I don't want to do that. I want to be interactive. So I may get things like slightly wrong here and there, but it's all off memory because I want to just be, and it's very difficult. I don't have 2 or 3 people to talk to and say, and while I have a look at my notes and stuff. So this is me just freeballing. But anyway, right. So National Hunt Chase, similar to how I did the other day where I was running through horses and stuff, we're obviously tightening up a bit. Mr. Coffee sat there at 10-1. Horse that loves coming second. He could win this, but he could have won I think it was Kimmuir, something last year, and he didn't. He could have won at Utoxeter the other day, but he didn't. He just seems to always come second. He's been plotted for the National. Could he win here? He could, but what's he more likely to do? Probably finish second again. And Henderson has got a very poor record in this race. I think off the top of my head, it won't be off the top of my head. I'd have to flick down a little bit because I have got that as a note. I think Henderson is something like 0 for 17 in this race. He has not got a good record, much like Paul Nicholls. Paul Nicholls and Henderson are not the ones for this race. Apologies. Paul Nicholls is 0 for 19, and Nicky Henderson, who has also never won the race. So, and Nicholls had a short price favourite, joint favourite last year or the year before. So it's just those sort of things. It's not to say they can't win. And people say, don't use stats, don't do that. But it helps you narrow down the field because a trainer obviously is trying to get a horse that they think is it, but they just haven't quite got there. So stats are obviously just a pinch of salt to add to your argument, but I believe that is something that can be useful. So that's easy enough for me to write off Mr. Coffee. Marla Mission and Churchstone Warrior, they both tie in well with each other. They both got very similar profiles, 3 or 4, I think it's 4 runs they both had each, both over 3 miles. And I'm pretty sure both of them have come first or second in every single race. They obviously met in the 10 Up Novices Chase, which was strange that they took on that because neither of them needed to qualify for this. So it was just an extra race for an extra experience. And in the old school National Hunt Chases, that would have been perfect because you'd have been looking at a 15, 20 runner field, a load of amateurs, and they would have been exactly what you would have wanted. Proper battle hardened, let's go. But we're not in that sort of field nowadays. We're in fields where generally you can get a classy horse, you could have 8 runners, and it won't be ran like that. It'll be run like just like a Navan 3 mile 2 or 3 mile 4 furlong race. So both of those have their chances. On that occasion, Churchstone Warrior got the better of Marla Mission about half a length. There was a lot of wise guys. Marla Mission was becoming the wise guy horse because he had good form, good jumper, and he was coming into this. But I think a few were like, why has he took on this only 3.5 weeks out? And also, it wasn't great to obviously see him beat by Churchstone Warrior. They're both staying on, a brilliant race, but obviously they were both beaten. And at the end of the day, the issue that they've got there is that Marla Mission was beaten 60 lengths by Chemical Energy. Obviously, that clearly wasn't his run because he'd been off all summer. But at the same time, he still has been beaten by Chemical Energy. Chemical Energy, Gordon Elliott is the opposite of Nicholls and Henderson in the fact that he's the leading trainer in this event, and he's now won this event 5 times. And the biggest thing for him is the fact that he doesn't waste bullets with it as well. He's only had 10 runners in this, 6 have completed, of which 5 had won, and he had a 3rd and a 4th, and that was going into last year. So this year, he had Run Wild Friend finishing it 2nd in it last year. Run Wild Friend is very much like the profile of Galiard Du Mesnil, and the fact that he was a 2nd season novice chaser and he looked tailor-made for it. the downside of it was he bumped into a very classy animal in Statler. Statler wouldn't have won an old school national hunt chase where it was like them all bumping off each other, amateurs, proper hardcore stuff, staying off the bridle. But it was a 2-runner race. It wasn't an 8-runner race or whatever. It was a 2-runner race. They both went off in front and they never saw another rival. So Chemical Energy flopped a little last time out, but I think I would be more than happy to throw a line straight through that. The vibes weren't good. They said he was going to need a run. They took him out for the freshness. The problem was he didn't jump well. Whereas at Cheltenham, I was there on that day when and I backed against him. I backed Life in the Park, I think it was, Henry de Bronhurst, who's not been seen since. And Chemical Energy, coming to the first circuit, I was happy. But once he got into into the second circuit, Chemical Energy just went into a thing of his own. And obviously, we're getting the good ground, which is what they wanted. Surprisingly, they're going to end up with. Obviously, it'll be the first day of the festival, so chances are it'll be good to soft. So it's not going to be good ground, but that's good enough for what they would have wanted. They just don't want like soft ground. And he was class that day. However, last time, yeah, he didn't jump well, and he also coming towards 3 out. He made a really strong move to go towards the front. But I do think that jockeys do this when they're looking to get a big run into them and then have a big blow. Because he made a big move and then it was just like, right, your move's done. Wait for the rest to like come alongside. They went alongside and then he just let him coast home all the way home. And that to me is what you're trying to. He was rusty in his jumping, which says to me that they'd have a nice bit of time off and he wasn't schooling all the time. And then his finishing effort, he went for a big blow and then that was it, right? Let him ease off. That should take the edge off him and he come back. And I'd expect him to be in the 3 here. I'll be disappointed if he's not. But at the end of the day, we're looking at bankers and blowouts. And sorry, I'm just digressing here, but you're looking at what could take on Galiard Du Mesnil. Ramillies is very interesting in the fact that Ramillies could run here, but I just wasn't that impressed. Ramillies ran in the same race as Chemical Energy and got outstayed in the battle by the Devil's coachman, who's been an iffy jumper at best. And it was a 4-runner affair, turned into a mess and got turned over. You would say Ramillies did everything right, but the finishing effort, well, you're coming up to 3 mile 4 furlongs here. I've always thought Ramillies was a stayer. Like I thought he'd be in the Stayers Hurdle this year. But I think he's more suited to 2 mile 4 to 3 miles, having seen him this year. So therefore, that leads me to Galiard Du Mesnil. Galiard Du Mesnil, so you obviously, Mr. Coffee, I've said, likes to come second and not a great record. Chemical Energy, Elliot, brilliant record in the race. But I do think Galliard's got the class edge on him. Marla Mission and Churchstone Warrior are very closely linked with that half a length as mentioned. But Galiard Du Mesnil beat Churchstone Warrior 7 or 8 lengths. And that wasn't like as in giving a hard ride, that was 7 or 8 lengths quite comfortably. So in effect, he's got the beating of a lot of these. It's just going to be interesting to see if Ramillies runs. If Ramillies doesn't run, then in effect, Galiard Du Mesnil is probably going to be evens or shorter. So I don't want to say, when I say bankers, I don't want people to think like, oh, he said this is absolute stonewarts and absolute certainty. Because obviously my blog will clear up my thoughts of how strongly I am. But of looking at this race, do I think he is the most likely winner? Yes. Would I put anyone off taking 11 to 8? No. I do think 11 to 8 is a fair price. Because if Ramillies runs, you might get, I don't know, maybe 6 to 4 at best would be my educated guess. If he doesn't run, then he's going to go off odds on. So, and I think Ramillies is his most likely rival. And as I've said, while he could be better than what I've seen so far, I think Galiard Du Mesnil has got the class. He's a Group 1 winner. He's been plying his trade in behind Mighty Potter. And I think as much as they said that he wasn't going here, the fact that Mullins has campaigned him nicely at 2 mile 4, I like it when they keep him over the shorter to not bottom him out and then just give him one big run. And the fact that obviously he did so well finishing 3rd in the Irish National, he's going to have stamina in abundance. So from day one, that in summary, I wouldn't put you off taking the price on either of the first two. And yeah, I don't like to use the word banker, but I do think they're both the most likely winners of the races. So where's our next one? If we go further down. So next up is going to be the Champion Chase. I'm aiming for the horses that are below 2 to 1 in the market. So Champion Chase, we've got obviously we've got Edwardstone bordering on 2 to 1, but we've got Energumene actually at 2 to 1. So the problem is with Energumene is, as I stated many a times, is the fact that Mullins is now, I think, something like 1 for 19 in the Champion Chase. And obviously that was last year, he broke his hoodoo. So he was struggling. He had so many good horses that got beat, the likes of Duvan, sent off 2 to 9 on. So it just wasn't getting the rub of the green. And then last year, for once, one of his adversaries, who obviously nearly always gets better in this race, was Nicky Henderson. Obviously, Shishkin just ran no race from the off. We found out he had many problems, including a bone illness, since. But so he got a freebie in effect, and he beat Funamba or Finambo Savola. And it was bottomless ground. I was there that day, and it was awful, like really, really bad, which would have suited him because he loves the slop. I've got two theories about this. One is the fact that maybe that race took a bit off him, combined with the fact that he had not a hard race, but he knew he had a race when he raced Chakan on Chakans, and Chakan was Pete Chakan back in Ireland at the end of the year at the festival. So he knew he had a hard season last year. He came back and he did all right times. He was nothing spectacular. He was actually slower than Impervious on the day in the. She ran in over the same trip, but earlier in the day, and she was faster than him. Obviously, she is carrying less weight, but the point that I was getting at was he still looked fine. And 3 months ago, it looked between Energumene and Edwardstone. But I was really shocked when I saw him obviously beat at Cheltenham. Like, I could put up some excuses. He travelled very, very strongly behind the bridle. He was jumping, but I thought he was jumping. There's been a lot of talk about him jumping not very well. I thought he was jumping very well, but he was jumping over jumping. So rather than cleaning out the fence by minimum, he was going a little bit too much air. But I thought his jumping was fine. But what worried me was his finishing effort. Like, I know obviously you could say he'll have a big hard blow and then he'll come, but coming to the last, obviously Energumene and Edwardstone have been stalking each other and they've given Editor G too much rope. And coming to the last, when he needed a big one, he asked him up and he literally went straight through the big one, which said to me, one, obviously the jumping under pressure, and two, is the fact that he was just tired. He was tired on his feet. And even if he'd made that jump, I'm not convinced that he would have kept up with Edwardstone, because coming up to that fence, you look at the body language of, I think it's Tom Cannon on Edwardstone. He looks across and it's like, I think he thinks I've got him beat. So, and then as they jump, he was quite comfortable. Whereas Paul Townend was like, flipping, oh, I need to get a big one. And he went for it and he didn't get it. So my worry for that is, one is the fact that obviously 1 for 19 Willie Mullins, and the other one is the fact that it is so difficult to win 2 champion chases. I have beat the drum on this all year, and it's so easy to just forgive it and be like, yeah, but it's a class horse. He did so well last year. Yet again, once more, I mentioned the fact that it was, I'm sure it's Masterminded and Altior. Masterminded blitzed the field, and you'll see his replays this week because he's been everywhere about people saying top 5 best performances. But he went back the second year and he scraped home, and Altior did it back to back. But even horse like Sprinter Sacra couldn't do it back to back. It took him 4 years to regain that title. So it's so difficult for the 2 mile champion chasers to be at their peak. And when you've got horses like Edwardstone, who is an Arkle winner, where I haven't got the numbers, but you look at the Arkle winners and like their last 10 Arkle winners running in this, it pretty much says 1 1 1 2 2 1 1 2 2 2 all the way across. Basically, they go so well in this. The Arkle graduation for like something like, which is why obviously everyone expected Shishkin to go so well last year. If he'd ran to his race, he probably would have won. If he ran to his Clarence House chase run, he would have beaten Energumene. Obviously, that's all ifs and buts, different ground, different day, different track. So I can't say that, but you know what I'm trying to get at. And obviously, Editor G is a bit like the dodging bullets route in the fact that he's just winning everything that's put in front of him, and everyone's just going to keep saying, yeah, but they didn't perform, or they didn't perform, or it'd be different on the day. So he is a massive challenger. And then Gentle to Me, everyone knows I'm not a massive fan of this horse because of the way his form is so in and out. He could run a massive race, he could bomb out, but it's worth remembering, like, he's already finished behind Edwardstone in the Clarence House chase. So he has to get past that rival. But at the end of the day, we're analysing Energumene. So that, to me, there's 3 rivals there that could all give him a game. I think Editor G and Gentle to Me are going to go out in front. They could set it up. It could be perfect for Energumene because they could have tabs on. They know how far Gentleman to Me is. And I think at home, they'll know that Energumene, how much better he is than Gentleman to Me. So they'll know roughly how much they've got to keep an eye on him, sort of thing. And the race will suit a lot better. There'll be a faster pace and they'll be going for it. And he should settle better with that, obviously, that under his belt. But for me, he's a blowout at the moment because of his price. He's sat there, he's at 7 to 4. And for me, with those 4 at the front market, he's 7 to 4, and you'd think he'd be 7 to 4 if you were coming here off a perfect prep. The only thing that's holding him there at 7 to 4 is, 1, he's trained by Willie Mullins, and 2, because he won it last year. Apart from that, you take that out. He wasn't an Arkle winner. He did most of his racing in Ireland, and obviously he was beaten in his best race. His best races is a Clarence House Chase. That was the best performance by a country mile. So I mean, I just think he's got plenty to prove, and at 7-4, he's a blowout for me. So that's not to say that come the day, this is what I'm saying to you. We've got another 2 weeks to think about this. Only 2 weeks to the festival. 2 weeks. In fact, today's Wednesday, so 2 weeks today, we'll know who the winner is. But obviously, there's a lot more time to think about it. But if you're saying to me, do I want to back him at 7-4 right now? The answer is 100% no. And is he a banker or a blowout? He is a blowout in that field. Obviously, we've got plenty of time to analyse it, but I'd rather take the 3 in behind. I mean, people are going so wild, they're starting to tip up Nuba and Negra. And I mean, that is straight up madness. Oh, onto the controversial one, the one that many people argued with me straight away as soon as I put up. But here we are, and it's happening. And that is the cross-country chase. And obviously, sorry, apologies. And that is Delta Work. Obviously, everyone knows how much of a fanboy I was of Tiger Roll the last few years. And I didn't doubt him even with the rain last year. But I don't want to talk about that race. So we're going to go with Delta Work. The reason that I was so strong on Delta Work not being able to win last year was for the fact that he hasn't been around the track. I thought course experience is so important. The difference is obviously we've always known Gordon Elliott gets his own private schooling. We see photos of him, and normally he'll have the favourite and he'll take 2 or 3 others, and you'll see them in the photos, and they'll be doing the schooling. And last year we all expected that Delta Work would be coming for this year, not last year, but he didn't. And this year, long and behold, the people who have been backing Delta Work all through the winter, Galvin started appearing in the pictures, and it was just an absolute repeat of last year. And people are saying, no, it's not, it's nothing like it. Honestly, it could not be any more carbon copy. Galvin, Group 1 winner, won the Irish Gold Cup last year, beating A Plus Tard, who went on to win the Gold Cup. So he had Group 1 form at the top level. He returned with a win this year, and he was very good. And then he had a few lifeless runs. He's been given a 3-month break to sharpen up. And just like his National Hunt Chase, he won in the summer, then he had a good break, and then he came back and he won the National Hunt Chase on good ground. The cross-country chase is very difficult to water. Galvin is currently rated, off the top of my head, at least £6, possibly £10 higher than Delta Work. That's not to say that obviously he's better, like peak to peak. It was the fact that Galvin was obviously sent off 10-3 for a Gold Cup last year. So his peak was literally just last year, whereas Delta Works was a few years ago. And the way I see it is quite simply, it's the fact that if the rain comes and you get a good amount of water, then Delta Work is that's it. There's not the rest are playing for places. If it's good ground, Delta Work could still will be the same case because of the fact that, as I've mentioned, course form to me is very, very important. But with this little Elliott private schooling thing and the way they race against each other, it allows horses like Galvin, he may not have course experience, but he will have ran a race there in effect. I guarantee the way you see them schooling, he probably puts 3 or 4 horses, they go round and it'll be like Galvin and Delta Work chasing 2 other horses, and they'll make it into like a mini race sort of thing. They're obviously not going to push them right out, but they'll get to know all the obstacles, all the courses, the way the track layouts, and you cannot put a price on that. That is so important in the cross country. So if they've done that a couple of times with Galvin, the difference is he wants good ground, Delta Work wants cut. So at the moment, we've got no rain forecast, and they're talking about water in the cross country at the moment. Well, we've had the cross country called off twice, and we've never ever been able to water the cross country, but somehow apparently we're getting water down on the cross country track. So the other fear would be the fact that the cross country race could get cancelled altogether. But at the moment, they've mentioned no issue with that whatsoever, and they've said we'll get water down everywhere. So that could well be the case. So for me personally, he's a massive threat against him. Away from bankers or blowouts, I backed Galvin yesterday at 3-1, and that's with the view that if the ground doesn't really change, so as in if we're going into it and it's good ground, then I'll probably take a chance on him. But it just depends on Delta Work's price. If the ground stays good and Delta Work drifts, and it's a bit like Tiger Roll and Delta Work, and it's like 2-1, 5-2, I can always add in Delta Work and then take a price close to evens if I could get a bigger price on it. But obviously, I think the advantage, course experience is massive for Delta Work. Don't get me wrong, most likely winner, and he would be a banker, but he is not a banker on this ground. So what I'm trying to say is, obviously, this is bankers or blowout. Would I take even money? Absolutely not. If the ground stays the same as what it is, he will not go off even money. He will go off bigger price, unless Galvin's a non-runner. But it's very hard to see, unless there's an issue with Galvin, why he would be a non-runner when he's getting his favoured ground, he's had a fresh break, and he's got the class. we don't know he handles the track, and we don't know this will be his sort of thing. 'Cause it's one thing doing it at home and another thing doing it on track. But Delta Work got all his conditions last year. Yeah, he was brilliant, giving 2 stone away a few weeks ago when finishing third. But at the same time, he wasn't given an easy ride. He was ragged to get there, and he did have some sketchy jumps. So Delta Work, if the ground turns up soft, heavy, banker, yeah, I'm happy that he's a banker. However, if the ground is not, so if it's like, as they're about to say, like good or even good to soft, and they struggle to walk the cross country, which I believe they probably will, then I'd say he's a blowout just because of his price. Even money is a shocking price for that. Horses like Tiger Roll was being said. Tiger Roll won the race, and then the next year he was in at like 8-1 all the way along. It'd be like 8-1, 6-1, 4-1. Delta Work was priced up at 5-2 straight after the race. So I just think even money is way too short, which makes him a blowout. Is he the most likely winner? If he gets his conditions. Is he the most likely winner on our predicted weather forecast? No, because of that. Problem is, what beats him if it's not Galvin? If Galvin doesn't handle the track, he may still get away with it, even though there's not, even if it is good ground. Because I look through some of these and I'm like, Franco de Port, back on the lash. These are like back on the lash. These are good horses, good ground. They both enjoy that, but these Aber's inconsistent. Back on the lash has done well, but it was handicaps. So that 2 stone he got, he's given back. So it's hard to see him getting in front of Delta Work if Delta Work runs his race. So as I've said, I think the biggest threat and probably the only threat is Galvin. And if the water comes, if I've backed Galvin, it means I can then add to Delta Work and just use Galvin as a cover bet. But currently, straight up, he's a blowout for me. So that's obviously 2 bankers on day 1, 2 blowouts so far on day 2. Okay, right, onto what I call favourites Thursday currently. So we're about halfway through. So favourites Thursday, and we have got Mighty Potter in the Turners. So anyone will know who followed me last year. As Mighty Potter, I wasn't too. I was lukewarm on him last year because I was a bit of a Sir Gerhard fan and stuff like that. Whereas this year, anyone who's followed me this year, which I think many people have, is I've been a massive fan of this horse. Mainly because I just thought any horse that won the Drinmore, which looked the most competitive race by a country mile, was going to have to be a very good horse. And he not only won it, he absolutely bolted up. And going back to obviously day 1 preview, he bolted up from Galiard Du Mesnil. So that's good form for both of those 2 horses. And then the DRF, did he do anything he didn't already know? I couldn't believe it when he was sat there at 9-4 a few days before. I thought it was too good to be true. And then obviously he was sent off around the even money mark, and even that was too good to be true because, I mean, the race looked worse, like not worse, but not a lot more competition than what was in the Drinmore. And he just repeated the same again. He beat Adamantly Chosen, who had finished second behind Jerry Colomb. And just that horse is very consistent yardstick. He hasn't achieved an awful lot, but he's coming here and you're thinking, I say he hasn't achieved it. He's obviously he's the best of the Irish. The best race for me over 2 mile 4 is that DRF Festival, which wasn't a much better race, but was the race before the Drinmore. And so therefore he's beaten all of those. However, he's meeting different horses here. The horse he's meeting here is Banbridge and Appreciate It. Banbridge, however, finished 18 and a half lengths behind him in the in that Drinmore. So there's many good judges, and that's the problem. Many good judges that I respect. And this is me. Sorry, just go off topic. Is we are in Cheltenham, massive festival craziness, madness right now. And my best piece of advice, and I'm not one who's standing here telling you like a financial advisor, is listen to everything, watch everything, take in everyone's opinions, but then just sleep on it and make your own view. Do not just follow people like this, because some of the best judges that I know are all over Banbridge to reverse that form. And I've asked some of my best friends, close people to me, and some judges, and they can't see it either. Like I personally, I just don't understand it. Like Banbridge, the ground was softer that day, which wouldn't have suited him, and perhaps he was off the back of that was his 3rd run in about 6 or 7 weeks, so perhaps he needed a bit of freshness. But he really needs to go some to be able to turn that form with Mighty Potter. Like Mighty Potter was just elite, and I think he's just an elite horse. I think he could be a superstar, whereas Banbridge I think is a good horse, but I think that's it. Like I said, he's a top level, like he could be a Group 1 chaser. But I think Mighty Potter's one of those where he could be one of those like really, really top level draw horses. I think he's improved at least a stone for fences, and he looks electric. He travels strong with a double handful. He jumps well. He pecked at a couple in the Drinmore, but there was none of that at the DRF, and it just looked like a question of how far. And this as well, you look at the record, haven't got it off the top of my head, but Elliott's got a very good record in this race. Obviously, recently won it with Sam Crow, and I just it's hard to pick holes in. So Gerhard apparently is going to go to Brown Advisory, so he won't be there. Journey with me, he's not on this sort of level in my opinion. Stage Star will be very interesting, but apparently he's going to the Brown Advisory, so that just leaves Appreciate It. And whilst I was very impressed with Appreciate It when he was a novice, now at this level, I just can't have him whatsoever. I've made it pretty vocally clear at the DRF that I just thought that it's not that he's regressive, he just hasn't like kicked on, because at the end of the day, he's a 9-year-old. How can you expect him? I think, as I mentioned at the start of this video, was the fact that through the COVID years, you were racing against the same horses, and you look at the horses and stuff that he was beating then. He's had 2 years off, and you're holding on to his form from 2 years ago, where he looked very good on soft ground, beating the same horses. And there, the times of sectionals were good on the day, but since then, I've seen nothing that would tell me that. He was fifth in the Champion Hurdle last year, and then I thought he was very average in his 2 novice chases, and then at the DRF, he was well beaten by El Fabiolo. Like, I mean, yeah, he was given an easy time in the end, but he couldn't stay up with the pace. His jumping was okay. Like, at the end of the day, you heard from people in the Mullins camp, both, I'm not going to mention names, but they were saying that they thought this horse would go incredibly close, and he was punted into 5-4 favourite. Like, I couldn't have that whatsoever. And the only reason he finished in front of Dysart Dynamo was because they were pretty much hands off the reins, and Banbridge came on to pass him in the thing. So obviously it's Willie Mullins, and at the end of the day, a bad run normally follows a very good run. They learn a lot more, and they think, oh, I need a lot more work into him. So he could come on here, and he could be leaps and bounds. And he is a horse that obviously he was special in the past. Like if he came in and for whatever reason he just blew this apart, I wouldn't say that couldn't happen. But at the same time, I just think that he's not the horse that once was, and he's making the market for other horses. So going back into one big circle, Mighty Potter, banker or blowout, banker. 11-8, would I take it? Yes. Do I think the price would get bigger? I think potentially he might. Because at the moment we're in what's known as preview time. So every night there's previews, every day there's previews, and you're already seeing market moves for different horses. And what I mean by that is if there's a couple of, say, big judges and they go hard in on, like, I think Banbridge will turn the form around, or Mighty Potter hasn't got a chance, it's too competitive. Not so much hasn't got a chance, but he's too short for the competitive. I think you'll start getting a little bit of a clipping, and I could see you maybe going 6-4 or a little bit bigger, or you might get a few boosts where you might be, say, 7-4 or 2-1 on the day. But if you haven't backed anything in the race and you're telling me banker or blowout, would I back, as in if I had no bet, is he a banker for me? Yes. Would I back him at 11-8? Yes. And then obviously 2 weeks down the line, I'll see what his price is. If it's shorter, brilliant, I've already got a price. If it's bigger and I think, do you know what, I still fancy him, the ground's good. Because another thing is the difference in ground. If the ground comes up good, like as in good to firm, whatever, or like faster, then that's going to suit Banbridge more. There's nothing, though, that Mighty Potter has got that will say that it won't suit him. It's just we know that Banbridge enjoys good ground, and obviously he's got course and distance form. But at the same time, that's something that you can't analyse until close to the time. The only one negative that Mighty Potter's got in his whole career was last year at Cheltenham when he flopped. But for whatever reason, he was very outpaced in the Supreme. He kind of hit the fourth, and then it was like, no. But going down at the start, the vet had to check him out, and then I'm not saying he didn't travel, but he was never really put in the race because you had Dysart Dynamo, Constitution Hill, and John Bond. They just went off like a rocket, so no one else saw them. He was in the backpack. And he's better than the likes of Kilcrook stuff, even if he was on a non-going day over 2 miles. So I just think he didn't run his race there for whatever reason, and that's the only thing you can knock him with if you're looking at his price, and that might be enough for him to grow a little bit. But yeah, I'd be confident. Mighty Pot would be one of the better bets for me for the week. So Ryanair Chase, this is an interesting one, because obviously a few weeks ago we wouldn't be looking at this, we'd be thinking it's either Allaho or nothing. And unfortunately, everything has changed. Allaho is now gone and been replaced with Shishkin. So, where do we start with this? I'm going to keep this short because obviously this is already getting into a long video, and I haven't got to Friday. French Dynamite, good horse, but probably like a very good handicapper. Same with Garlaw. Fakir Duderies was a complete flop last time out. Envoy Allen, not a fan of him since his new days. Janadil will become the wise guy pick, second in the race last year. A lot of people will say he'll come on for the run. However, he goes very well fresh. So last time out, most people thought he wouldn't win last time, and he did, and he beat Horton Calor quite well. But everyone was saying he was quite tubby going into that race. So you've got two ways of looking at it. He'll come on for the run and he'll be even better, and because his jumping wasn't great that day, and he'll go well here. The other way of looking at it is he's a bit tubby, and he's been forced to like make his race because it was a scrap in the finish. He got the result there, and will he kick on from there? Me personally, like not so much bounce, but just not go forward in his performance. I could see him not improving just because the fact of how well his fresh record is that a lot of people forget about. Fury Road, 7-1 shot, like good horse, admiral horse. Probably be a fair price if you didn't have the likes of Shishkin in there. And then Blue Lord. Blue Lord, in effect, I put him up at 7-1 the day of Shishkin Horton Galore because I didn't know if everyone was going to flop. I thought 7-1 was more than fair. I thought he'd definitely come here. And what happens with a Willie Mullins horse is often when they flop, they bounce back with a vengeance. He was brilliant at Christmas, and then he completely flopped last time out, and there was nothing, obviously, not a lot's come to light. Apparently, a few of the horses worked prior to that. They worked really well, but then when it came to the racing festival, like the likes of Facile Vega, on that DRF weekend, you think you have Blue Lord, Facile Vega, Galopin Des Champs, who I think ran not to himself. He didn't have his normal zest. And there was another, Lossiemouth. Obviously, hers was very different. But I think Blue Lord, you'll see a much better horse here. He is inconsistent, but he ran well in the Arkle, finished third or fourth there, and obviously the Arkle form's working out well. He's the only horse in here. Actually, that might be a lie. I don't know. I can't, off the top of my head, I don't know about Fakir Dudari. He probably has, but he won't be in here. So, in of the horses that are racing, unless Envoy Allen's done it, which I wouldn't be aware of, Blue Lord has raced to, I think, a 171, and it normally takes around a 170 performance to win this. The last few years, I think Allaho won it off maybe like a 176 the last couple of years. That's just off the top of my head. And obviously Shishkin, I think, achieved a 176 or 175 last time out. So what I'm trying to say is, and I think Shishkin, bar his flops, I think out of his last six or five runs maybe, he's ran four of them have been over 170. And I don't think hardly any of these horses can run. In fact, pretty much, bar Blue Lord, as I've just said, I don't think any of them can run to 170 unless they find mass improvement. And it's not like they're unexposed horses. So basically, to put it quite simply, if Shishkin runs to the same level of form that he ran last time out when beating Pic D'Orhy, who arguably, if Pic D'Orhy was in this, would probably be maybe 6 or 7-1. So the same sort of level of competition. If he runs to that same level again here, then it's very difficult to see him beat. Unfortunately, the price is going because a few people have said that he should be a lot shorter. Maybe he should. So currently his price is 8-11. So the one question mark is, can he repeat it? Obviously, especially after the pain of everyone backing him for the champion chase at Cheltenham last year. So for me, it'd be one that I've had a decent bet on him, but at the same time, I don't want to put him in my top tier of betting because it's hard to get over what happened last year. So is he a banker? Yes, but obviously the question mark is, will he run to that form? But you're hoping he runs to that form that Nicky Henderson can keep him at the same level or better, whereas the rest of the field need to basically they're hoping he flops or he goes below. Would I take the 8-11? If you haven't backed him, then probably yes, because the fact I could see him going off, he's got the same sort of numbers as what Allaho has. So Allaho went off 4-7 in this. So I can't see a way where you're going to wake up, unless something's happened on the Tuesday, Wednesday, that the bookmakers are feeling brave. I can't see a day where you're going to wake up and Shishkin's suddenly going to be 5-4 or 6-4. I think 8-11 would probably be the sort of price you'll be hoping to get on the day. He could be, you may get close to evens, but I think, in my opinion, is he'll be between 4-6 and 4-7 if the vibes are good, if Henderson's happy and everything else. So regardless of price, he's a banker. So what else have we got? Right, the Mayor's Novice. I'm going to keep this short because obviously I am dragging on here time-wise, and it is 7-4. It's not like we're looking at a short price horse. The other thing that I can't really assess with the Mayor's Novice is the fact I do not know who's going to run here. I can look at this field and there's like 20 runners of mares, and in reality I could easily see probably 12 of them running. But the key for me, and the fact is, I'm not going to bangs or blow it, but I think Luccia is one of those that is a superstar in the making. It's just whether she's got enough experience just yet. The Epitaph ran in this race a few years ago and went off favourite, and she ran no race because the vibes were good, the strength was good. She's won a couple of hurdles, everything about her looked good. the whole day got the better of her, and then she came back in March the year after and she won the Champion Hurdle. So everything they thought was correct, but it was just a year too soon. However, I think Luccia will be different because I don't think the field's going to be as big, and we're not looking at like a Limini or Limini or a Lorena or a Let's Dance or a Annie Power currently. Like Astro Diamond looks very good, and I'm not going to run through all her form because I've done it many times before, and she's got like top form, and she's only been beaten by obviously Facile Vega, Ilite Toms, Marine Nationale, Irish Point, either Group 1 horses or Group 1 winners or Group 1 placed horses. So she has got very top level form. And she has been campaigning very well to learn how to jump, travel strongly in all of the works, and is a perfectly good rival. But I do think come the day, Luccia will be, for me, in this field, depending on what turns up. I don't want to say bank or blowout, but she is definitely the one to beat. The only thing I'll say is, would you take the price? She is shortening now. She's coming in 6-4, but she's easily a horse that you can't tell because I don't know how big the field's going to be. This is one of the ones that the field could be any sort of size still. Is if the field is still quite big, I could see her boosted. So she could be out to like, she's 7-4 now. But if she gets backed into like even money because of these preview circuits, if someone keeps saying, yeah, she'll win, she gets backed in, then she'll end up 7-4 as the boost. Whereas if people aren't too keen and they're a bit like, oh, there's more depth to this race, she could be 2-1 or so. But you look through some of the rest of the field, and like horses like Night and Days only had one run. Magical Zoe's only had one run. Princess Zoe's only had one run over hurdles. So like, there's a lot of horses with really inexperienced. So whilst people are saying Lucia's inexperienced, she looked class, and yeah, she is inexperienced, but she's won a listed race and then she's backed it up recently. So obviously, I've had, anyone who knows my anti-post knows I've got Luccia at 4-1 and Astro Diamond at 10-1. But Luccia, I think, will be the one to beat. And if you said to me you can have one bet in the race, it will be her. But if you want to take the price, it's hard to know which way that's going to go. I think you could get a bigger price because people are going to be a bit wary of her. On to the Friday. So Triumph Hurdle, Lossiemouth and Blood Destiny. Let's keep this fast as possible. Lossiemouth, big flop last time out. Don't have to explain how bad that was through the stable issues. People are now starting to latch on to Blood Destiny and say that he's the good thing and like all of this, Paul Townend's going to ride him, and that's what you're seeing the money for. So Blood Destiny, it wouldn't surprise me if by the end of this week that Blood Destiny is like 2-1, because there's a lot of these Irish things and a lot of them are saying Blood Destiny is as good as Lossiemouth. You go back to the French form on the same card, and Lossiemouth and Blood Destiny both raced on the same card. They raced off levels, even though they were in different races, and she's a mare. The race she raced in, they both carried the same weight, and Blood Destiny finished behind Beau Zenith, but their race was quite a bit quicker. So on collateral form, Blood Destiny is a little bit faster, but obviously she does get the mare's allowance. The difference is for me is people were saying, like I've heard this week, is that people were saying like, oh, Blood Destiny's got the form where arguably they should be shorter or even favourite. Like, I don't agree with that. Like, I understand Blood Destiny's got stacks of potential, but there's a massive difference in what form of who's been racing what. Like Lossiemouth's been racing all the group performance and running all the Triumph trials, beating horses that were destined to go towards the Triumph, and then if they get beaten, they go off towards the Boodles, or they just run again in the Triumph. And if she took the DRF, which she should have, like, I'm not having the Galion Marceau would have won that race. This is my personal opinion. She was in prime position. Galion Marceau picked up that position when she got knocked back 10 lengths, come around the back. So if I think she would have had that, and that would have been obviously a Group 1 as well. Whereas Blood Destiny, on the other hand, like Blood Destiny's ran twice, and visually impressive, sectionals impressive, but the horses that are all stacked up in behind are Boodles horses. They're not Triumph horses, they're not Group 1 horses, they're all horses that were trying to protect their mark for the Boodles. So it was almost like, quick, we're getting close, we're like, whoa, back off, we don't want to get too close, don't get within 10 lengths of this horse. So Blood Destiny, don't get me wrong, again, everyone who follows me knows I've got both of these, 16-1 Lossiemouth, 6-1 Blood Destiny. I do think they're both the two most likely, but I'm not having that Blood Destiny should be favourite, especially with her getting the mare's allowance. However, I'm not saying that Blood Destiny won't go favourite if Paul Townend picks him. If Paul Townend picks him, he'll go favourite. But after the massive hash of a ride that Paul Townend gave Lossiemouth last time, like, it doesn't really make much odds. I don't think she's a very complicated ride. Either of those two could win. My point with Lossiemouth is it's a tough one for Bangis or Blowouts, because whilst I think she's the most likely winner, and if you said to me even now, like one horse in the race for you to bet, my answer would still be Lossiemouth. But Blood Destiny is so hard to weigh up. Like, it's hard not to have a saver on that horse. And also, I think the market, as I said, is going to move, and it wouldn't surprise me if close to the time they're close to 2 to on the off. Whoever Paul Townend picks is going to go off favourite. so they could well flip flop. Or so if you followed and if you backed Lossiemouth at the big prices, then I'd cover on Blood Destiny if you haven't already. But obviously this is bankers and blowouts. For this race, I just can't, like, as in she's the most likely winner, but I would not touch her price currently because I think she's going to drift. Right then, so what have we got left? The Gold Cup, Galopin Des Champs. This is a tough one because I don't think you can go any horse a banker in the Gold Cup. I wasn't like massively into the Gold Cup followings in the Court of Star days. It wasn't a race that I really studied and hit hard. But to put it quite simply, Shishkin's not going to run. Protectorate I cannot have after that flop last time out. Manila Ender scrambled home, getting £8 from Statler. Statler was well beaten by Galopin Des Champs. Hewitt I can't have despite the ground, whatever it is. Ahoy Senor does not jump well enough. He's learning again. It's like he just forgot everything he did last year. But he doesn't jump well enough. He doesn't travel well enough. And like I just can't see a way where wherever Ahoy Senor finishes, Brave Man's Game won't finish in front of him, despite a galloping track. I think Brave Man's Game has improved so much. And Ahoy Senor, whilst he might be learning and doing everything again, I just can't have it. Conflated is an interesting outsider. Can't put you off it, but I haven't backed it myself. Statler has already finished behind Galopin Des Champs. Noble Yates, to me, a lot of people are saying he'll suit the extra 2 furlongs. Totally agree with that. And it could be another Emmett Mullins mastermind where he's tricking your eyes and he has got a lot more in the locker. But I just can't have that a Grand National horse can cut back in a mile, race at top level and beat Galopin Des Champs. Cutting it down, I'm not telling you to bet here. I'm just comparing to Galopin Des Champs each one. So Noble Yates, I thought he stayed on last time at Cheltenham into third behind Ahoy Senor. That form's not good enough to win here. And also the other factor is the fact that he's quite slow at his jumping in the early stages. And if he's like that and he's like niggly and stuff, he's not going to keep up with the pace of these. And people are like, oh, he stayed on really well. Yeah, he stayed on like a Grand National horse because that is obviously what he is. Brave Man's Game is a massive danger, in my opinion, to Galopin Des Champs. I see them as very similar profiles. Brave Man's Game, the fact that he's won the King George, and I said this a few weeks ago, if Allaho was the horse, that if Allaho did what Brave Man's Game did, travelling 4 wide on the bridle, niggled along, coming back on the bridle, won against La Homme Presse going away, and then wins by 10 lengths when La Homme Presse fell. If Allaho had done that, Allaho would be sat in here at 5-2 or 3-1 for the Gold Cup and about 1-2 for the Ryanair, providing Shishkin wasn't around. So to have Brave Man's Game at 8-1 is pretty insulting. But I'm not here to tell you about price. I'm here to just compare. All I'm saying is that as far as bangers and blowouts is, I think this is my personal opinion. I know a lot of people are massively the opposite in this. I think Brave Man's Game is huge against Galopin Des Champs chance-wise. Aplotard I cannot have at all, in my own opinion. I backed him last year when he won it, one of the most impressive winners. But a flop in the Betfair Chase, a no-show at Christmas, not been seen since. He's seen once, and it was his worst run of his career. I think it'll be Henry's biggest training performance in his career if he's to be able to get this horse back to win here. So just cutting through that, then what is Galopin Des Champs really going up against? If you cut that through, don't get me wrong, it could be a vintage Gold Cup, but on paper that doesn't look like a vintage Gold Cup. There's a lot of them who've got chinks in their armour here and there, and I do think he is the class act in here. But I do think I'm trying not to keep going into price because of the fact that I look at him next to Brave Man's Game and I see them both with very similar profiles. It's just the fact that a lot of people, for whatever reason, not Nichols negatively, but Nichols is the master of 3 milers, and I know he's not proven it at Hill. But going back to Galopin Des Champs, is he a banker? I wouldn't say he's a banker. Is he the most likely winner? Like if you said to me, right, your life depends on it, pick one horse, I'd have to pick him. But at the same time, would I back him at 7-4? No, because the only way I see him being short on 7-4 is if throughout the week Mullins just completely dominates the whole week, and they just think he gets shorter and shorter, and his form gets boosted, or something that he's beaten like a Ryanair or National Hunt, and then it gets shorter and shorter. In reality, the Gold Cup is the most competitive race of the week. The negative for the Gold Cup for both Galopin Des Champs and Brave Man's Game will be if the ground came up heavier. If it was softer ground, he could struggle because of the fact that it's going to play a lot more on stamina, and the likes of Noble Yates, Ahoy Senor, Statler, all of those will love that sort of ground and that sort of experience. Whereas he's a classy horse. He may well handle that. you've got nothing to say you won't. So for me, I'm staying with the banker. Galopin Des Champs is a banker. Would I back him at 7-4? No, just because I think you'll either get that on the day or you'll get bigger because it's a competitive race. And a lot of people will say this horse hasn't even proved anything. He fell in the Turners last year, blah, blah, blah. You're just going on superstar and potential. And I think, and you probably will get 2-1 or bigger. So, right, let's just have a recap. I'm going to go back through. So on summary, we have Champion Hurdle, Constitution Hill, banker. Would I take the price if I hadn't took it at 4-11? If you like backing 4-11 shots, yes. National Hunt Chase, Galiard Du Mesnil, banker. Would I took 11-8? Yes, but you could wait. I don't think he'll get much bigger. If Ramillies goes, then he could be odds on. Champion Chase, Energumene, Blowout. Purely because of his price, Mullins' record in the race of Champion Chase returned horses, and also the fact that he just didn't look the same horse when last seen, and he's got 3 good rivals. And Cross Country Chase, Delta Work, Blowout, not because he's not the best horse in the race, not because he's got the best chance in the race, just because of the factored ground. He's currently good ground, he's sat there at even money, and he's a blowout for me at this current time. Turners, Mighty Potter, banker. Would I take the price 11-8? Yes. Shishkin, 8-11, banker. Would I take the price? Yes. Mares Novice, Luccia, 7-4, banker. Would I take the price? As I said, I wouldn't be in a rush. 1, because you don't know how many of these run, and it could be plenty competitive enough. And 2, she's only had 2 hurdle starts, so I think plenty will be looking to take her on. So unless she gets caught up on the big words on the circuit, then you could well get bigger than 7-4 on the day. Triumph Hurdle, Lossiemouth, banker. Not so much a banker. As I said, I do think it's between the front 2, but I do think Lossiemouth is the right favourite and has the form to be the right favourite and the most likely winner. Would I take the price? No, because I think with all these words coming from the Irish, is that Blood Destiny is going to get shorter and she's going to get bigger after her issue last time out. And finally, Gold Cup, Galopin Des Champs, banker. Would I take the price 7-4? No, not unless, like obviously most people are on the bigger prices. I just think he'll be a bigger price on the day. If Mullins starts winning all the way through the week and you think, do you know what, I want to get on, then obviously take your choice. But I can't see after declarations where you're suddenly going to load up and he's going to be like 5-4. I think unless there's some big non-runners, I think he's more likely you might load up and you'll be 15-8 or 2-1 to win the Gold Cup. So I just want to clarify, obviously, bankers and blowouts is a very strong factual sort of thing, but you've just got to take it with a pinch of salt. What I'm saying is, are they the most likely winners and do I expect them to win? Then yes, and just basis of at their current prices, would I back them or not? The other thing obviously is consideration is the fact that we're coming into Cheltenham Festival season now. I've got 2 more weeks of reading previews, finishing the blog, and it's now at over 30,000 words. So it is going to be pretty lengthy, and it's going to have a lot of detail in there. And some of these horses that I may say are a banker there now, it could rain. We could get like change of events. You could get certain horses going non-runner, so things are going to change. But at this current day, or my current opinion, those are how I feel. So the next video that I'm going to put up will be on Sunday, possibly, and that'll be 1 week until my Cheltenham Festival blog will be coming out. And that video is going to explain how I got into writing the Cheltenham Festival blog, why I did it, and it's also going to include a short version of everything that you'll find in there. So things like, what race do I think Constitution Hill will go for next season, why I'm writing about those things in the blog, where you can find it, what and how my blog will be laid out, and the information that you can find in there. The blog will be posted the Sunday after, which is the Sunday before the festival. So I hope you all have a good week. Me personally, there'll be no punting. It's just anything that I'm betting will just all be Cheltenham. And that'll all be on Twitter or it'll be put on my Cheltenham blog. And looking forward to it. See you all at Cheltenham soon. Thank you.